current president. Here now to debate that, Talk America radio contributor Kimberly Klasick and Democratic strategist David Morey. Guys, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Good morning.
David, I want to start with you. This article now is 4 years old. I don't remember a lot of outrage when this article came out at the time, and these tweets have since been deleted. How do you defend that?
Well, I think it sounds like they were wrong. They should say they were wrong. Yeah. This issue, Rob, is one of many administrations. The Bush administration, the Obama administration brought illegal immigration down substantially. So has the Trump administration. It's kicked back up. This is about polarization. It ignites one extreme against another. And we see that the blame, I'm saying, is everywhere. Multiple administrations, Congress, the White House, Democrats, Republicans. And if we merely abrogate to the states and the courts, Rob, we're not going to necessarily like the solution that happens. The administration may not like the solution that happens, and it'll continue to ignite ourselves. We need a bipartisan bill after these midterms.
Okay, and yeah, there's a lot to talk about in the immigration debate. Kimberly, I want to go over to you. When this article came out, do you recall anybody being outraged at these pictures? Do you remember a big backlash? It seems, though, that maybe this was what they call selective outrage because the president, the current president, is responsible. People got mad, and maybe now they're not.
Yeah, no, I'd never even heard of this article until it came out recently, falsely. So unfortunately, we live in a time where the climate is that we're going to smear President Trump and his administration at all costs. So you have liberals and anti-Trumpers doing whatever they can, even inadvertently ruling out their ounce of credibility just to take him down. Sean King, for him to post this photo from 2014, this should end his career. He, not long ago, I would say probably a month ago, posted about a Texas police officer allegedly sexually harassing and raping a woman as he apprehended her. It turned out that that was false, and luckily they had body cams to prove that. So I asked, in 2014, why wasn't President Obama held accountable for these photos? In 2010, President Obama had all three branches of government. He could have done something about DACA and immigration, and he decided not to. And I have to point out, many Democrats decided to vote against the issues as well.
David, over to you. I want to show you this response tweet after Linda Sarsour, who's a very polarizing figure in this country in the first place. She deleted the initial tweet from Sunday, and then she posted this. No amnesia here. Our immigration system is a disaster and was a disaster long before Trump came along. Now it will become increasingly worse under this white supremacist administration who have made their hatred for immigrants crystal clear. Is that a fair response in your opinion?
No, of course not. I mean, it's back to my first point. This is political extremism, polarization, one side against another. I mean, in fairness, Kimberly, you know, the Trump administration is not just the only people getting smeared. They're doing a little bit of smearing themselves. This has become a political issue. The president's gone hard to his base. He's over-serving his base, probably more than any president in history. And that's solidifying the base, but it's not necessarily solving the problem. I'd love to see, after these bloody midterms, Rob, a bill that has names on it like McCain and Graham, a bipartisan bill that gets to a solution as opposed to everyone accusing everyone else of all kinds of smears.
Working between the aisle. Remember those days? How novel that was?
Long time ago.
Hey, Kimberly, I want to ask you real quick. Is this a clear picture of how polarized we've become, that it almost seems like people are only angry when something is done by somebody from the other team? When their guy does it, they don't really care?
Absolutely. And I have to say, Dave, I understand, but you have to admit that President Trump is taking the brutal beating here way more than Obama has. And I just ask going forward that these self-proclaimed journalists just do some fact-checking and research before dragging people for their narrative and their agenda.
Lots of beating going on here.
Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for coming on. That was a great discussion on this topic. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jillian, over to you.
All right. Bye.
The giant American flag could be taken down for good over skyrocketing costs. Officials in Independence, Iowa will vote today on whether or not to hang their large flag after they decided it was too expensive to replace it. Veterans have offered to pay for it themselves.
This flag is extremely important to me. I just wanted it back.
Well, we're going to hear more from Bill Coulter and his plan to save the flag coming up on Fox and Friends. Stay tuned for that. A powerful photo showing a moment of respect for our nation's heroes. The Atlanta Braves posting the image of a fan holding up an umbrella to shield a JROTC cadet in the rain. Just look at that. The young man standing next to the POW MIA Chair of Honor at SunTrust Park. The empty chair is meant to remind people that even though imprisoned or missing soldiers are not there, there's still a space for them.
That is very cool. Love that. 54 minutes after the hour, one university honoring our fallen heroes in an amazing way. How they're making sure that their kids are taken care of.
One woman is taking the home away from home feel a little bit too far. You'll never guess where she was caught shaving her legs in the video that's gone viral for all the wrong reasons.
Now.
Looks a bit foggy there in D.C. this morning.
Still pretty shot.
It is.
Nice house.
Always a pretty shot.
Nice house they got there.
Yeah, it's all right. Just kidding. Time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. First up, the good. The University of Memphis will offer free tuition to children and spouses of fallen service members. It will be the first school to offer the National Folds of Honor Scholarship as full tuition.
Next, the bad. A North Carolina neighborhood setting up their own toll road, charging people $5 to get through. Residents fed up with people using their privately owned street as a shortcut to the beach. The toll is legal since that road is fully maintained by all the people that live in that neighborhood. Yeah.
And finally, the ugly. I don't know if you saw this, but a woman was caught shaving her legs on the edge of a busy hotel swimming pool in Florida. And take a closer look. There's the razor. There she goes.
Ugh.
She's even rinsing her razor in the pool. I'm actually I'm grossed out by watching that.
And that's not her pool. That looks like a community pool.
No, there are kids in there. Like, as a parent, wouldn't you be like, hello?
Yummy. That'll start your Tuesday off right. We'll see you later.
New reports the U.S. has halted sanctions against the rogue regime as the two sides continue talking.
There's a lot more message discipline coming out of this administration. No premature talk of Nobel Prizes this time.
The search intensifying at this hour for missing National Guardsmen who tried to save lives in a city underwater.
Is this really leading by example when you're resorting to calling your colleagues on the other side of the aisle bums?
You're actually worse than bums if you're not willing to stand up to a president.
For the record, that was not a looks-based joke. That was about her ugly personality. She has the Mario Batali of personality.
Our whole country pledges to you, we will never forget our heroes.
Hey, welcome back to the new week. I know some people worked yesterday, Pete Hegseth, but we feel like this is somewhat of a Monday after that sacred day, which was Memorial Day for marking the passing of those who lost their lives in battle.
It's sacred day indeed. I actually had yesterday off, too.
You did? You were off yesterday?
I did go to a ceremony, though.
Did you? Well,
yeah,
as a veteran,
my hometown. Yeah, it was a wonderful local ceremony, and we honored the fallen. It was a great day. So I had the day off, too.
Where's hometown?
Holmdel, New Jersey.
Okay.
Originally from Minnesota, via Minnesota.
All right, so tell us how you marked Memorial Day. I know that you were actually on Long Island.
I was out in your neck of the woods.
And how'd it go?
No Brian Kilmeade sightings, though.
None.
What'd you do?
None of your business? No, I'm only kidding. One thing I will add, and I was just talking about this in the break, a lot of times people like to talk to me before the show starts. Once the show starts, it really doesn't go too well. But I saw Deadpool 2.
Good.
It was the most unbelievable movie I've seen.
Really? I've heard that from a lot of people.
It is fantastic.
I heard it
They even
was
have
good.
a Fox and Friends reference in there, a bit of a dig.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Right.
What's The Showman, the one about the circus trainer? I heard that movie was good. I heard that yesterday from two people,
also
actually.
Not seen that. I was too busy watching the NBA
The
Finals
Greatest Showman or something like that?
Meanwhile, you could not take your eyes off what was developing with the Singapore summit. Back on track, and here's the latest. We have a Fox News alert. A top North Korean official reportedly on his way to the United States right now.
Yeah, the diplomat seen there hopping on a New York-bound flight overnight.
Our own Griff Jenkins live in Washington, D.C. ahead of the potential summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Griff, good morning. What do you got?
Good morning, Pete, Ainsley, and Brian. Look, this is diplomacy in overdrive. This brand new video of North Korea's ruling party vice chairman Kim Jong-chul in the Beijing airport heading to the U.S., according to South Korean media reports, to continue preparations for the historic meeting. Plus this, the U.S. delegation on the DMZ at this hour, meeting with North Korean officials. That delegation is made up of these guys: U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Sung Kim, the National Security Council's Director of Korean Affairs Allison Hooker, and Assistant Secretary of Defense Randall Shriver. Meanwhile, in Singapore, the site of the summit, a North Korean delegation has reportedly arrived to meet with the U.S. team already in place there. Plus, President Trump holding a Memorial Day call with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, telling Abe that they are in, quote, close coordination in advance of the expected meeting between the U.S. and North Korea. So, guys, things can change quickly, as we've seen time and again. But June 12th is just 2 weeks from today, and the dialogue seems to be strengthening because South Korea's President Moon greatly helped it by that meeting he had with Kim on the DMZ. Finally, we're hearing there is talk of one last meeting between Secretary Pompeo and the North Koreans to give the final go-ahead. So it is fast moving. There will be developments, and the president heads to Nashville tonight for a rally where we certainly will hear more. Guys?
All right. Thank you so much, Gruff. Yeah, that guy is very well known. He was the one that represented North Korea in South Korea for the Winter Olympics.
Right. And where he's coming from is key because it's from Beijing, China.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We know who's holding a lot of cards here. China.
So why not let him in the talks? I mean, if you can't pull off a yes or no or check this box without China's approval, put him in. And if you want South Korea involved in this, which they're thinking about doing, let them come in. I mean, there was a reason why the six-party talks were there, because so much is at stake besides us. Because if we have a deal and China's going to have an emergency beachside meeting to pull that deal back, like which kind of screwed up everything reportedly before, just put them in there.
Well, there's going to be those side talks no matter what, right? I mean, North Korea is going to step out of the meeting and make a phone call to Beijing and say, do you like this or not like this? Include them formally or not is an interesting question.
Well, we're going to have Kellyanne Conway to ask her, is this meeting definitely on? Because the president says it's potential. There's a possibility that I would like to move forward as planned. He talked to Japan's prime minister yesterday over the phone, and the prime minister of Japan said, I want to meet with you before you do sit down for this North Korean summit. So they're both going to be at the G7 conference coming up the first week of June 8th and 9th, and maybe they'll be meeting there. He also says there's potential, or the media over in Japan is saying he might go to Washington to meet with them.
Well, put it this way, I think they're both dead serious for different reasons about getting it done, us and them. And the thing is, they have that meeting that was canceled mysteriously between North and South Korea because of military exercises that were already on the books. All of a sudden, they had an emergency meeting Saturday. Hey, let's go meet by the DMZ on the north side.
Was that for that letter, though, Brian?
Right.
No, actually,
the letter and then the response.
The letter and the response said, suddenly Kim Jong-un picked up the phone and said, it's time to meet.
Well, I just see Karen Tumulty of the Times, Washington Post, and former of Time magazine said this about what she's seen so far.
There's a lot more message discipline coming out of this administration. No premature talk of Nobel Prizes this time. And I think also, one of the things that's going to be really important here is kind of setting some realistic expectations for these talks, as opposed to thinking that somehow, you know, by the force of his personality, President Trump can bring about full denuclearization, you know, in his first meeting.
Yeah, she said the way it looks right now, it's a lot more professional this time around than before, and Mike Pompeo is going to meet again with Kim Jong-un prior to the summit.
I just feel like a lot of that's been undue criticism, as if this White House doesn't have their eyes wide open about the difficulty of this task. Rhetoric is one thing. Pulling people to the table through letters with strong talk are different than understanding how tough it's going to be to end a conflict that's been going on for 70 years and a rogue regime that's got nukes. I mean, it's not going to be easy. I think they know that.
All right, Congressman Adam Schiff, he is the lead Democrat on the House Intel Committee. He said that Republicans, anyone who supports this president, he called them bums. And then his colleague, Congressman Eric Swalwell, who's a Democrat from California, doubled down on that. Listen to this.
Ranking Member Schiff's point is that if they are not willing to be open to having their minds changed about holding the president accountable, then their seats are going to have to be changed. You're actually worse than bums if you're not willing to stand up to a president who is attacking a former FBI director, a patriot who served our country in Vietnam, like Bob Mueller. I think he was probably being kind to them. People want to see a check on the president, but they also want to see us to put on his desk the things that he has said that he would sign that Republicans won't show the courage to do, like immigration reform, like an infrastructure package, like prescription drug reform, and like background checks. So I think people are pretty fed up, and they want to see people to start to stand up to the president.
So Eric Swalwell says what he said about bums. But with the president, some people might not like the president's tone, even on the Republican side. But they see he's built up the military. They say that he's finally stepped up and tore up the Iranian deal. He's got North Korea at the point where they have to deal, or they know they're going to be in the middle of a war. Tax reform has passed, $700 billion for the military. They're on the cusp of VA reform. So they see that, and they say, I like what's going on. But I think this has been a Republican caucus that has stood up to the president, much to his chagrin. The Freedom Caucus has given him a hard time. You know that in the past that Rand Paul has stood up to him at different times. I think they've been remarkably honest, when they want to break with him.
Yeah, you're right. The Republican Party has been divided, especially a year ago.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
No, I think, well, and the Freedom Caucus has actually improved a lot of bills from the conservative perspective. You don't like it, it's not good enough, we're not going to vote for it, it gets better, then we vote for it. This line about, Bob Mueller served in Vietnam, it's true. It's great. I love it. That's like saying, okay, so if someday, 20 years from now, I'm a special counsel, which I'll never be because I'm not a lawyer, because I served in Iraq, I'm impeached. You can't say anything about me.
With everything
like if I hire 13 Democrats and I'm having a partisan investigation and I'm not looking at the facts and we don't know what Bob Mueller's going to say, my service in a foreign war doesn't make me someone who you can't criticize. So I don't know. I mean, the whole idea that the whole bums thing that they're not taking him on. I mean, this president has been under assault from the left and the media from the beginning. And, Republicans have played it pretty straight with him on a lot of levels, as you said, Brian.
Well, I think so, too. And I think that's a great point. It's not Bob Mueller in particular, it's who he's hired, which raises eyebrows and makes people feel really uncomfortable that it's not going to be a fair and balanced investigation. But, again, we don't know. We know that the president's got a lot more aggressive of late against the Mueller investigation, and he's much more comfortable this way. Yeah. He does not like sitting on his hands. I don't know if you've noticed. So he's not going to sit there. He's not going to let everything go by the boards. But suddenly these attacks, the Russian attack and constant the pounding of that has helped his ratings go up. His ratings are higher, they're about 45% now.
Because there's been no new information. There's nothing new. What are we learning? Nothing new, just more stuff, more nonsense for the media. So.
You know what's new? We have not said hello to Jillian yet.
We haven't. Hey, Jillian.
Good morning.
How was your weekend?
It was great. How about you guys?
It was good.
Excellent. All right, let's get you caught up on some news because we are following this Fox News alert. A desperate search intensifying for a National Guardsman swept away in a flash flood. Edison Herman last seen trying to help a woman when he fell into the water in Ellicott City, Maryland. And down south, subtropical depression Alberto turning deadly after making landfall. 2 TV journalists were killed when a tree fell on their SUV in North Carolina. The storm now moving north, bringing drenching rain and wind. A fire department diver has died during a rescue mission in Chicago overnight. 46-year-old Juan Bucio was searching for a missing boater in the Chicago River when he was somehow injured. He was separated from his partner underwater and lost communication before he was pulled from the river. 2 other divers suffered minor injuries. Bucio, a 15-year veteran, leaves behind 2 sons. He also has a brother in the fire department and a sister in the police department. The freed American prisoner held in Venezuela for 2 years gets a hero's welcome overnight. Josh Holt's grandmother draping the American flag over his shoulders as the hometown crowd sang the national anthem at the Salt Lake City airport. Holt and his wife were accused of stockpiling weapons after he flew to Venezuela to marry her in 2016. President Trump helped bring the couple home. Holt telling friends, quote, "We finally got our freedom." President Trump honoring America's fallen heroes on Memorial Day. The commander-in-chief speaking to Gold Star families in an emotional speech at Arlington National Cemetery.
Theirs was a love more deep and more pure than most will ever know. It was a love that will them up mountains, through deserts, across oceans, and into enemy camps and unknown dangers. They died so that freedom could live.
The president also laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And in a more private moment, Chief of Staff John Kelly and his wife visiting their son's grave. Marine Corps First Lieutenant Robert Kelly was killed in Afghanistan in 2010. So look at your headlines and look at that picture, and it just really touches you.
That guy's got perspective, no doubt.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jillian.
Jillian.
13 minutes after the top of the hour. Coming up, liberal comedian Michelle Wolf. She's back with a new round of attacks against women in the White House.
If anyone's an expert on hypocrites, it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And for the record, that was not a look.
You missed a lot. Overnight, a top North Korean official reportedly on his way to the U.S. from Beijing, believe it or not, to work on reviving the June 12th summit. This, as the president plans to meet Japanese Prime Minister Abe beforehand, telling him the high-stakes summit is expected now. So what does this on-again, off-again messaging tell us about the summit's potential? Morgan Atagas, not one to get caught up in hype, is a former press officer at the U.S. Agency for International Development. She joins us now to weigh in. Morgan, even since we booked you, things have changed a lot. So on the surface, where do you think we're heading, as both sides seems to be on turbo speed to make this happen?
Well, Brian, it seems like we're headed towards a summit with Kim Jong-un and President Trump. It seems like both sides are working feverishly towards this, and I think the reason that you're seeing the president and the Japanese prime minister talk, and the reason that you're seeing the South Koreans and the North Koreans also talking more leading up to the summit is because I don't think anybody particularly knows what will happen when President Trump gets in the room. When you are a part of these diplomatic negotiations, typically everything is incredibly scripted ahead of time. All of the statements are scripted. The negotiation is basically done when the principals get in the room. And I think all of us who have observed President Trump over the last year and a half know that that's not his style. He wants to be in the room. He wants to be negotiating. And I think given his history, he thinks he can get to the best deal. That probably unnerves the people who are on the other side of the table, because this is sort of upending probably 30, 40 years of diplomatic tradition between the U.S. And North Korea, which I think is a great thing.
Well, possibly, and it seems as though Kim Jong-un wanted this even more than we thought. What do you think was going on behind the scenes as he cancels the North-South Korea meeting because of military exercises he knew about, doesn't send a delegation to Singapore to plan for June 12th, and then all of a sudden and China seems to be pushing him back. Then when President Trump writes the letter with an opening to re-engage, he writes a letter back to re-engage, no bluster. What do you think's happening?
Well, I think for those of us who are foreign policy geeks like myself, this is sort of the best soap opera that's ever played out for us. I think what's happening is that the North Koreans desperately want out of these intense sanctions that the President Trump and his administration pursued at the United Nations. I mean, keep in mind that in order for the North Korean economy to survive, they're so utterly dependent on trade within the region. I think that they would love to see some sort of economic opening between themselves and the South Koreans even more. So the whole ball game, and this isn't a new ball game, is that they want out from under these economic sanctions. I think they're going to promise their first child in order to get that done.
Morgan, 20 seconds. Would you be against having South Korea and China there, being that they need to play a role in the final product?
Listen, I trust the president and I trust his senior advisors. They've certainly got us a lot farther with North Korea than the past administration did. This is incredibly tough, and I think if anyone knows North Korea, it's certainly Ambassador Bolton, who has their number.
He does, and he gets under their skin. I don't think the president minds that too much.
No, neither do I.
Morgan, it's great to see. It's great to see experts like you saying we've never been here before. The script is out the window. Thanks so much, Morgan.
Thanks. Have a good Tuesday.
Yes. Meanwhile, straight ahead, the American Medical Association is about to jump into the gun control debate, and they've even got some recommendations for Congress. Should this group of doctors be getting political, ? And we showed you this crazy video, a real-life Spider-Man saving a boy from a window ledge. This morning, we found out where the father was, and you're not going to believe it. It's going to anger you, but I can't believe this guy. Watch what he does. How do you do that?
We are back with a Fox News alert. Israel defending its people from dozens of mortars fired from the Gaza Strip. This, as we learn, Israeli forces are retaliating with airstrikes.
Love that Iron Dome. Mike Tobin live at a kindergarten building where, believe it or not, a mortar hit. Hey, Mike, were they in school?
They were not in school. It was just a short time before the kids showed up with their parents before when the mortars started hitting here. But the Israeli response has already begun. When we were live last hour, you heard a couple of explosions go out over the air. The IDF has now confirmed that is the beginning of their operations into the Gaza Strip. Palestinian media is reporting that there have been strikes around the Gaza City area. We saw a plume of smoke coming from the area of Khan Yunis. Again, the IDF confirming that's the start of their operations. They're urging people around these border towns to continue their normal activities as if nothing was going on, but be ready for more loud explosions. All of it a response to this. I can show you shrapnel from the mortar that hit here at this kindergarten. All of these shards of metal were flying around here just a short time before parents and their kids showed up. Let me show you some of the impact as we look over here at a pipe that was pierced by a piece of shrapnel. The building itself, sad to say, that's a reinforced building where the kids go to kindergarten, and you can see the flecks on the side of that building where the shrapnel impacted. Now, it was accompanied by some, first of all, I should tell you, we can show you video of the Israeli Iron Dome defense, which activated during the course of this attack. The IDF claims that a number of projectiles were knocked out of the sky, lessening what could have been a devastating impact. It was accompanied by machine gun fire aimed at the town of Sderot. Cars, buildings were hit, no injuries. Islamic Jihad has claimed responsibility for it. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised a response, a forceful response, and it looks like we're seeing the beginning of it. Guys, back to you.
Wow, never a dull moment. Mike Tobin, thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, Ainsley.
Okay, thank you, guys. The American Medical Association will meet to discuss its official recommendations for gun control legislation. The group is set to push for an unprecedented number of measures designed to push Congress into action. Should the AMA be getting so political? Here to weigh in on this is Dr. Nicole Saphier, a radiologist and breast cancer specialist. Hey, Dr. Saphier.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. When I read this, when I saw that the American Medical Association was pushing the gun control agenda, I thought, what? Why are they getting involved in this?
Well, the American Medical Association has historically gotten involved in a lot of political issues. That's partially why they don't have a ton of physician support. In fact, they only make up about 25% of practicing physicians because of their political and financial motives. But they do have a strong arm when it comes to lobbying. They spend over $21 million a year, so they are a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the midterm election cycle coming up. And this group is getting together this June to put together their recommendations when it comes to gun reform. We do have over 30,000 people a year dying from gun violence in the United States alone. That is more than AIDS. That is more than many cancers. So it's not unsurprising that physicians and healthcare officials are saying that this is a public health crisis. What are we going to do about it?
How do they tend to lean? Do they lean more liberal or more conservative?
It really depends on who you ask when it comes to that. They have gone both ways, bipartisan. They supported the Affordable Care Act and they opposed some of President Trump's health care reforms. However, they also supported appointing Tom Price when he was initially appointed by President Trump. So they go both ways. It is very hard to appease the masses, but I can't say on one side or the other which way they typically lean.
Do you know what their recommendations are as far as gun control is concerned?
Well, they've kind of put out some of their suggestions, and I do see what they're going for. They want to tackle gun control from two sides, essentially, and by also maintaining the Second Amendment. Their goal is not to take away the Second Amendment, but what they want to do is they want to make sure that guns are staying out of hands of people who would be at risk for misusing them, and that would be increased access and treatment for mental health patients, also universal background checks, not just people who buy guns in gun stores, but anyone who purchases a gun, they want to have a background check. And they also want to make sure physicians can have conversations with their patients regarding gun safety. And then from there, they want to look at what kind of guns are actually getting in people's hands. If there is going to be an incident, how are we going to avoid mass casualties? So they are talking about potentially limiting sale of the bump stocks and the semi-automatic ammunition in guns, essentially.
Okay. Dr. Saphier,
thank you.
Well, he killed a police officer in cold blood, but now he wants the city to pay him
And thought the White House Correspondents' Dinner was bad. Well, liberal comedian Michelle Wolf is back with a new round of attacks against women in the White House. Listen.
If anyone's an expert on hypocrites, it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And for the record, that was not a looks-based joke. That was about her ugly personality.
A new show on Netflix, and she was just getting warmed up on that one. We also want to wish a happy birthday to Mel B. The Spice Girl turns 43 today.
If you want my future, forget me.
It's the All About Brian show. This is your shot of the morning. In case you missed it this weekend, Prager University released its latest message on Americanism, and this one has a familiar face.
The United States had to fight not one, but 2 wars for its independence. The first, of course, was the Revolutionary War. Can you name the second? It was the War of 1812. Now, both wars were against the British. And in both cases, the Americans should have lost. The Revolutionary War is very much celebrated in American history. The second one has all but been forgotten. But had it been lost, America's history would have been much, much different.
That is great.
Yeah, they do a series of videos, just educational videos, huge hit.
Brian, I got to say, I recently drove across the country and listened to your book on audio tape. You were with me for 12 hours.
Get out of here.
Yes.
That is
reading to me.
Can't ever get enough BK.
Never can.
The hardest part for me, and I'm still getting complaints, is to slow down.
Oh, really?
Everyone's like, slow down.
That's hard to do, isn't it?
It is for me.
It's a fantastic book and a great reminder. You forget about the War of 1812. It was all gone, possibly.
You're a good teacher.
Our teacher, you might say.
What is this, Brian? There's your book.
Oh, yeah. You want it for Father's Day. People love war. Fathers love war stories.
Yes.
Andrew Jackson, The Miracle of New Orleans. If it wasn't for him, we don't win. And we don't hold on to anything past the
He had horrible diseases, and he, his shoulder, and he still carried on.
He had a bullet in him.
Got shot.
And he suffered from dysentery, and he's down to 140 pounds at 6'1", but they still were able to prevail. And, of course, Memorial Day, people think about that because a lot of families have legacies back to the Battle of New Orleans, and they have written me and said, we had relatives in that battle.
Wow. Buy it for Father's Day. It is a great book and a great gift for your dad.
All right, now let's talk Netflix.
Okay, Michelle Wolf has a new show, and you might recognize that name. Can't picture who that is. She's the one right there. Remember, she spoke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and she got a lot of grief because she was making fun of Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her looks. So now she has a new show on Netflix.
Oh, great. She does. And it debuted, or one of her first couple episodes played. Well, she went on more to extrapolate about this administration, glass ceilings, the CIA, Sarah Sanders. Listen to what she had to say.
Gina was nominated. My best friend, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, tweeted, "Any Democrat who claims to support women's empowerment and our national security but opposes her nomination is a total hypocrite." Well, if anyone's an expert on hypocrites, it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And for the record, that was not a looks-based joke. That was about her ugly personality. She has the Mario Batali of personality.
I guess he's a chef who's had some trouble, which is unbelievably ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you meet Sarah Huckabee Sanders, which he did, she's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
She really is. Is that funny?
It's not funny.
I like funny. I will laugh. I'm a very generous laugher. I wish that was even remotely funny.
Well, Entertainment Weekly interviewed her and said, how did you feel about all the attention that you got after the White House Correspondents' Dinner? And she said, I think it's awesome. If people hated what I did at the dinner, they're really going to hate my show.
Fantastic.
Okay? All right.
I will say this. Here's an example. Number one, I think we broke news that Pete considers himself a good laugher.
Generous laugher. I like to laugh.
So
right,
if you would,
Janice?
Jillian, if you would add that to your newscast.
I can do that.
Number two, I think that Donna Rickles was somebody who spent his entire career insulting people but made everybody laugh. And I think that if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, even if you are a Democrat, he doesn't have hate coming out. He has opposite opinions, and he always does it. A lot of times he does it tongue-in-cheek, like I'm the smartest, I'm the best, I can beat the world with one arm tied behind my back. There's no humor. It's just venom.
Well, you know, we've heard if you're a good comedian, if you can do it without saying sexual stuff, and I've heard that means you're really good. I remember Seinfeld always said that. In this case, I think you're a really good comedian if you don't get political, or if you keep it. I think that's just those are so predictable.
If you
these
do
jokes.
it without conventional Trump hate, then you might actually be funny.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. All right, let's hand it over to Jim.
The first time I heard it.
Really?
We built this. It's a little redundant, don't you think?
This song is amazing.
It's easy to remember.
Yeah.
There is a city, Washington, D.C., where our president is tweeting this morning. We are all wondering, is this summit, this North Korean summit, is it on? Is it off? The president has said that it could potentially move forward as planned. And I know General Kim Jong-chol, who is the head of North Korea's spy agency, the former head of it, he is heading to D.C.
And how do we know that for sure?
Because he's tweeting, and here's the tweet. We have put a great team together for our talks with North Korea. Meetings are currently taking place concerning the summit and more. Kim Jong-chol, the vice chairman of North Korea, heading now to New York. Solid response to my letter. Thank you. We've had video of this vice chairman walking through the airport, coming, as you said, Brian, from Beijing, which is an indication of who controls a lot of what's happening in North Korea these days.
Yeah, which I'm saying, if they want to play a role, why stay behind the scenes? Just step up. Because in many ways, North Korea's belligerent behavior and their quest for nuclear weapons has caused problems for China. And another way, it's been a buffer to the South. And since you're going to have final say anyway, and you've caused a hiccup along the way, just put China at the table. And just let's find out what's happening here, because we need them to denuclearize. Also, don't you think it was significant that the South Korean and North Korean leader met on the north side of the DMZ, at which time the South left off and gave an update, a briefing, and said, we reiterated again that we looking for them to denuclearize, and they said they would. So, again, that just happened. It's almost as if those two... the letter the president sent was tough, but left an opening. North Korea's response was strong, but it left an opening, and they said, let's run through it.
Well, Japan's prime minister called the president yesterday, or I don't know who called to, but they talked on the phone yesterday, and they said, we want to schedule a meeting with you before you do have this North Korean summit. If it's back on, we want to meet with you, too, because we need to make sure we're on the same page. We do share the same desires. Those desires are complete, permanent dismantling of North Korea's nuclear, chemical, biological weapons, and ballistic missile program.
Absolutely.
They agreed to cooperate, and they have not yet set a date. But the Prime Minister of Japan will be at the G7 summit in Canada. The President will be there, and that takes place on June 8th and June 9th. This meeting is scheduled for the summit. If it is back on, it's scheduled for the week
These
after.
are the types of preliminary meetings that always happen before a big meeting. But we had Morgan Ortegas on Fox and Friends earlier. She's a former press aide at the USAID, and she said, this is done a little bit differently because of the stakes of what's going on, and we've got a businessman in the Oval Office. Listen.
When you are a part of these diplomatic negotiations, typically everything is incredibly scripted ahead of time. All of the statements are scripted, and I think all of us who have observed President Trump over the last year and a half know that that's not his style. He wants to be in the room, he wants to be negotiating, and I think given his history, he thinks he can get to the best deal. That probably unnerves the people who are on the other side of the table, because this is sort of upending probably 30, 40 years of diplomatic tradition between the U.S. And North Korea, which I think is a great thing.
I think this goes to show, too, the change of the president's team has made him more comfortable. I think when you have John Bolton there, he's got the hard line, and you have Vice President also took a very hard line. You have Larry Kudlow working on the financial aspects of this. China. And then you have the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who has given new power to the State Department. By the way, Mike Pompeo says, one more time, I will meet with Kim Jong-un before the summit. Well, who's Mike Pompeo? Whether you love him or not, the president does. Sure. So that gives the State Department and diplomacy more of a seat at the table and more power at that table than ever before. And I just think together this team seems pretty strong.
When you see that North Korean general walking through the airport on his way to New York, on his way to the United States, it sends a message, a strong message. We really want this meeting. We're coming over to negotiate. The ball, it seems to be, is in our court, and the president's going to make the ultimate decision.
And when you talk about that team, Brian, you can't underestimate how important that. Well, it starts at the top, but the team says we will do anything necessary to take away your nukes. better be time to come to the table. Well, and that's the calculus that brings a guy like Kim Jong-un to the table.
Well, you heard what Lindsey Graham said over the weekend after speaking to the president. He said, this is going to get solved in my first term one way or another. And the message is, one way or another, it's not going to just be sanctions. This is going to bring this to a head.
We're going to talk to Kellyanne Conway about it. She's the counselor to the president. She'll be on our show at 7:30.
That's right. Well, yesterday, as a lot of you did, we spent the day honoring those who gave everything. It was Memorial Day. You were grilling, but hopefully you were spending some time remembering those that gave you that opportunity. Well, President Trump was there with you, had a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. He has a great message for our heroes and for the fallen. Listen to what the president said yesterday.
While the rest of us sleep, while we go about our lives, through every minute, through every day, through freezing cold, scorching heat, and raging storms, they stand watch. Here they remained faithful at their post, eternal on guard. They never moved. The sentinel always stands because America never forgets. It's our heroes. To every parent who weeps for a child, to every child who mourns for a parent, and to every husband or wife whose heart has been torn in two, today we ask God to comfort your pain, to ease your sorrow, and to wipe away your tears.
Well, then he went on to talk about a personal story, which is always very effective when presidents do that, especially one they directly experienced last year. It was when Christian Jacobs, he's 7 years old, never got a chance to really know his dad, but dressed in a Marine uniform at Arlington, walked up to the president and said to him, would you like to meet my dad, see where my dad is? And they walked together to the headstone. And he says, I'm never going to forget them. He talked about that yesterday. Now, Christian's 8. His mom and Christian will be joining us in 15 minutes.
Wow. So sweet. The little boy was only 8 months old. There's a picture of him with his mom when his father died. And his mom said, Christian has cried, wanting to know why his daddy can't come down from heaven because he needs him.
When you see the face of the sacrifice, it means that much more. An amazing example, for sure.
All right, we just want to give you the latest. As you know, simmering underneath from day one of the president, even when he was president-elect, has been the Russian investigation of the Mueller probe. And the president, for over the last 4 months, has taken a different tack. He's going after it, saying this thing's got to stop. It's hurting everything I do, and it's certainly a huge distraction. Financially, it's destroying a lot of the people that support me. He just tweeted this out. The 13 angry Democrats, plus people who worked 8 years for Obama, worked on the rigged Russia witch hunt, will be meddling with the midterm elections, especially now that Republicans, stay tough, are taking the lead in the polls. There was no collusion except by the Democrats. And his referral, of course, is the fact that the DNC and Hillary Clinton campaign paid for the steal to get information on any Trump dealings in Russia, which gave us the dossier.
But as we talked about, I mean, who Bob Mueller has hired has undercut his credibility. All these high-level Democratic lawyers to go after this president in a way that looks like it's partisan, whether it is or not, has been effective to muddy the waters and show that this is something they're trying to prove an end state without the evidence to begin with. And where it'll go, nobody knows. But it never ends.
Well, when you think about the dossier, it wasn't verified. How did they get the FISA warrant for all of this? It makes the Democrats, their narrative was this president colluded. So throughout this investigation, it turns out there might have been an informant or a spy. There were definitely informants. Were they spies? What's the difference? We'll talk to Kellyanne about that. Was there someone embedded in the Trump campaign, or were they people that just came up to, you know, some of the people on the campaign trail at the bar and tried to ask them questions?
Right. We're going to talk that with Andy McCarthy. He's got a column in the National Review today. He's going to be joining us in about 10 minutes to talk about the spy, informant, and the role that he might have played. Meanwhile, at 9 minutes after the hour, Jillian Mealy's got the other breaking news.
That's right. Good morning. Good Tuesday morning to you at home as well. Let's get you caught up on this Fox News alert. A desperate search intensifying for a National Guardsman swept away in a flash flood. Edison Herman's last seen trying to help a woman when he fell into the water in Ellicott City, Maryland. And down south, subtropical depression Alberto turning deadly after making landfall. 2 journalists killed when a tree fell on their SUV in North Carolina. The storm is now moving north.
To another alert, and a live look in Belgium, where 2 police officers are shot dead. A gunman killing the cops and a bystander before taking a cleaning woman hostage inside a school near the German border. That suspect shot dead by police. A person claiming to be a witness posting this video of gunshots on social media. Investigators have not ruled out terrorism. Also breaking right now, Israeli jets dropping bombs in Gaza after the biggest rocket attack on Israel in years. The retaliation coming hours after Palestinian militants fired dozens of mortars from the Gaza Strip, one striking near a kindergarten building right before school started. There are no reported injuries. This just the latest clash on the Israel-Gaza border. Former President George H.W. Bush couldn't make it to a Memorial Day parade, so he honored our heroes on Twitter instead. Bush writing, quote, "Very much regret missing the Memorial Day parade today in Kennebunkport, and I'm forever grateful not only to those patriots who made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, but also the Gold Star families whose heritage is imbued with their honor and heroism." The 93-year-old is hospitalized for low blood pressure and fatigue. Let's look at your headlines, and you know he had to be devastated to miss that parade.
Oh, I know.
Tough guy. Still hanging in there. For sure. All right, thanks, Jillian. 11 minutes now after the hour. Top Obama officials is denying reports about a spy in the Trump campaign. But our next guest says... All right, President Trump up and tweeting today about the reports the FBI put a spy in his campaign, or a so-called informant. Let's get right to former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Andy McCarthy, who wrote about that in today's National Review. Andy, I was able to read it, get through it. It attacks this right away. An informant looking into the Trump campaign in order to find out what the Russians are up to. Is that a problem, and is it different from being a spy?
I don't see it being different from being a spy, Brian. When I was a prosecutor, when the informants worked for the government, when I spoke to the jury, I called them the informant. And when the defense lawyers talked to the jury, they called them the spy. And everybody knew exactly who everybody was talking about and why they described them the way they described them. To me, all this talk about the nomenclature is beside the point. The question is, did they have a legitimate basis to be using informants, to be using the government's awesome counterintelligence powers, including FISA surveillance, under circumstances where we have a norm in this country against political spying, particularly in connection with elections?
Andy, and what do you conclude? Did they have enough to do something like this, which you say is common? And we'll talk about the types of people that end up becoming informants. They're not necessarily great people. They're usually compromised. But from what you see, was there a reason to put him into this camp in March?
No. On the basis of what we know now, Brian, no. But, of course, what we've been asking for is disclosure of why they did it. On the basis of what we now know, what they put out is that they may have had some reasonable suspicions about Russia's sympathies on behalf of a handful of people and some of the things that Donald Trump had to say during the campaign. But it's woefully short of the kind of egregious misconduct that they had to reasonably suspect before you violate the norm of political spying against our elections. And that's why we've asked again and again, what was your basis for doing this?
And what would be the reason not to tell people with top security clearances the reason? It would quiet down many people who have questions like you and like the president.
Yeah, well, the obvious reason is that they didn't have an adequate basis to do it. And that's fortified, that suspicion is fortified by the fact that every time they tell us they can't tell us something, they claim it's because of national security. And then when the pressure gets ratcheted up and that stuff gets unredacted, we find out it's got nothing to do with national security. It's that they're embarrassed by what they've done.
So, Andy, as we try to find out what this guy was up to, who would have to sign off on that to put him into the campaign, or to find out what's going on in the campaign, to go up to Carter Page, to Sam Clovis, and, of course, Papadopoulos? Who would have to say, well, go ahead?
Yeah, ordinarily, to use an informant, whether it's on the criminal investigation side or on the national security investigation side, there's a pretty low bar. It's a much